and with me as always are Dixie Cochran.
Hi there.
And Matthew Dawkins.
Hello there.
And
Hello there. What's
and we've just been watching the They Came From Beneath the Sea trailer, which will be out soon-ish, but it's hysterical, and so now we're giddy and talking at each other in 50s American radio accents, so
Except that I don't really do one very well, so I'm just copying Matthew.
Yeah. It's the quality. It depletes with time, but I find that the 1950s Newscaster accent is timeless. It's the sort of thing we should have back on our TVs now. I think people would listen to the news with a little more respect if the person on the news was saying, "This just in!" Because it's always 24-hour news rolling networks now, and no one ever says, "This just in! There's been a X at Y."
X at Y is a known problem, to be fair.
Yeah, true. I ran out of steam. That's the problem. I couldn't think of a jarring news article.
Well, yeah.
Well, the problem is that anything you could think of would probably not be as ridiculous as the actual news cycle. So
right, exactly.
That's true. This just in: Promethean Night Horrors has just been released. There you go.
There you go.
Except last week, because this is dropping at a different time than we record. Haha! A peek into the process.
Just released.
Just.
It has been released.
It's true.
And it's a glorious book. It looks wonderful.
It does look really good. But we
That's
are
not what we're talking about this
No,
week.
we're not. We are going to talk about... My attempt as a segue into this topic was gloriously derailed, because we are going to talk about Storypath. One of the listener requests when we did our kind of mailbag impromptu thing during the emergency episode, someone asked if we could do a deep dive on Storypath as a kind of a holistic system. And so we said, yeah, sure, let's talk about that more. I mean, we're going to inevitably talk about the different games that use Storypath. It's not going to be quite like a... It's weird. It's not quite a family, but there's a system connectivity, and how each of those games are similar and different really helps to kind of talk about it as a whole. So I think probably a good way to start is, Dixie, you've read just about every Storypath game.
I have. It's true. I got to a point where I had edited the rules like 4 times in succession, and I did not want to do it anymore. Because I did both Trinity books and both Scion books kind of back to back.
Oh, wow, that's right, yeah.
And I was like, I don't wanna do this right now. But that's just what happens when you look at this similar block of text over and over again.
Yeah.
That said, I think Storypath is a really cool system in that it supports many different types of games.
And actually, that was one thing I was going to ask you about is, since you've looked at so much of it kind of in close succession, is what's kind of some cool commonalities that people say, oh, it's a Storypath game, what can I kind of generally expect from a Storypath game? Yeah,
so I mean, the basics of the mechanics are, it's also a D10 system, much like Storyteller, but the mechanics are a little bit different. So you roll, you have a target number, you do your successes, you can apply any enhancements that you have to get the number of successes, and if you fail, you get consolation. So there's kind of like a risk-reward thing going on, which is good in games in general, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you want to be rewarded a little bit for failing, otherwise you could just fail a lot and nothing good ever happens.
Yes.
But what I think is so cool about the system is that it works for Trinity, which, as we know, is, which is a game that also is incredibly malleable, because it can be sci-fi, and it can be superheroes, and it can be noir, and it can be all these different things.
Yep.
And then it works for Scion, which is at its heart, urban fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And then it works for They Came From Beneath the Sea, which is kind of a humor horror game. And I don't know too many systems that handle a bunch of that stuff well. There are other ones that are really great and work across genres, which is awesome. Things like, Fate.
Right.
But I kind of like what we've built here, because it works for so many of our games so well, and because it works to tell a story, which is ideally what you want to do with role-playing games. So it really encourages story beats and plot points and things like that. Mm-hmm. Which, at its heart, that's what we're trying to do with a lot of our games, is make them more, kind of building off the legacy of White Wolf and storytelling games. Kind of, we want this to be something where you tell a story, not just something where you roll dice all the time. So yeah.
Now, Niels, you mentioned that it's kind of a D10 system, and certainly, we've all been transparent in the fact that this was meant to be clearly comfortable for people who are familiar with storyteller and storytelling. So would you feel like this is a good kind of evolution of those systems?
Yeah. As somebody who plays storytelling games for years and years and years, and still does sometimes, I think it's pretty intuitive to pick up. Especially if you come from that background. I think even for people that don't come from that background, the mechanics aren't difficult, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I know that we've got a brochure that we hand out at conventions that kind of details the basics of it and gives some examples of different modes of play. But that's the other cool thing about it, is that it supports very different modes of play. Because you can play an action adventure game with it, you can play more of a detective, style game with it. You can do a lot of things with it that some other systems don't lend themselves as well to. So yeah, I don't know. Like the idea of choosing different paths for your characters instead of just having like traits and attributes, but then you are still rolling, skills plus attributes, which is a thing most people are used to. Although it is flipped, obviously, from storyteller. It's not attribute plus skill; it's skill plus attribute.
Right. Which is something that you and I both have had a lot of writers go, hey, no, we need the other way, right? The other way.
Yeah. Even while editing, I would occasionally not catch it because I'm so used to editing storytelling games that I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then I'd be like, nope, it's backwards in this one. But there are reasons for that, in that I know when Danielle and Neil and everybody were kind of developing the system, they really wanted it to be focused more on the skills your character has. And not just like, is your character strong enough to do this? Sure, but do they also have the athletic ability to do this, etc.?
Yeah, and I remember when I was chatting with, I believe it was Danielle about it, I was like, it seems to me what you're trying to do is, it's basically, first of all, you say, what am I doing, which is the skill, and then how am I doing it, which is the attribute.
Right.
And the fact that they changed the category of attributes to approaches and arenas, again, it's like, how are you approaching this problem? So I think it's counterintuitive to people who are maybe familiar with quote unquote white wolf storyteller games. But you're right. I think that people either coming to it fresh or over time start to say, it's actually a very natural progression. It's like, okay, I want to drive this car through a barricade. Okay, driving or pilot, that makes sense. And then dexterity is how I'm doing now. Okay, cool.
Right.
You roll those dice.
But I mean, also to me that makes more narrative sense. Like if you're reading a book or watching a show or whatever, a character is not going to say like, I should be able to pick this lock because I'm very dexterous. They're going to go, I should be able to pick this lock because I know how to pick locks. Like, that makes more sense. Like, not everybody who's dexterous can pick locks. So it makes sense that we put a little bit more focus on the skills. And instead of just, the basic attributes.
Exactly.
And yeah, you can pick different approaches, which is awesome. So, do you want to do something with finesse or do you want to do it with brute strength? You're doing the same thing, but you're doing it in different ways. And that can also change the course of the game, which works for all of the games that I've seen it apply to. The only one for our listeners that I haven't read yet is Dytopia Rising. That's in my editing queue.
Yes.
But, Eddie can talk more about that one, obviously.
Which I will, yeah. But for readers who haven't looked at these kinds of games yet, we talk about approaches to kind of give you a visual perspective. There are 9 attributes, which will look pretty similar to people familiar with these games, but they're not identical, which, again, this is something I've noticed a lot with writers writing the game. It's like, it's not strength, it's might, so on and so forth. But they're grouped into 3 arenas, which are going to be pretty common, mental, physical, and social. And then the cross-section of that are approaches, which people who play Chronicles of Darkness games will probably be familiar with the idea of, that all the people on a particular line are grouped in one area. So like you mentioned, the finesse this is your dexterity, your manipulation. So it's your finesse in a physical, mental, and social category, and then your force in a physical, mental, and social category. So that way each of the arena and approaches generates one attribute. So it can feel over-designed when you explain it, but when you're actually playing the game, I think it actually does help, because it's I want to talk to this guy, because social attributes for stuff from his lots, like which one do I use? Sometimes it gets harder to figure out which ones to use, but say, I want to convince this guy to do something. Okay, are you doing it eloquently, or are you just trying to socially browbeat him doing what you want to? It's like, I'm more of that. Okay, well, you're using the force approach in social. Okay, well, that's this attribute, so use that.
Right.
So it does help you to kind of figure out which attribute you need in which circumstance, which can be good when you have 9 of them. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming for choice.
Yeah, I mean, that also maps something that I'm sure we can get more into later, but there are three main modes of play in Storypath systems. And you can have different modes of play even happening at the same time, obviously, but it's action, adventure, procedural, and intrigue. So, of course, the action adventure is more the physical stuff, obviously. It's where you fight, fast-paced scenes, whatever.
Chases, yeah.
Yeah, procedural is the mental inspired. That's when you're solving problems, looking at clues. And then intrigue is social. So that can be romantic ties, interrogations, all those sorts of things. So those also kind of map to the, category of approaches. And you can approach different scenes in different ways, which is cool, because if you watch, once again, dramas or movies or stuff, or stuff. I'm very eloquent today.
And or things.
Yeah, stuff and or things. If you like stuff and or things, then you're probably familiar with, movies and or TV shows where there will be a fast-paced action scene followed by a tense, dramatic moment,
Right.
followed by them trying to put pieces together. And since Storypath is very much inspired by media and kind of the way that media presents stories, even to the fact that we use words like episodes and arcs, to describe the different bits of it, that's important to me, because I always, felt like when I was playing games back in the day, playing vampire games or whatever, it always felt kind of like a TV show. And so in this game, we've actually structured it more like a TV show or a movie. Probably most obviously in They Came From Beneath the Sea, where you are in a B movie, but it works for all the games, which is cool.
Yeah, and actually that's a perfect segue, because it's one thing to use kind of arbitrary language to define things. Like in the past, Storyteller in particular has used a lot of prose. In terms of it's a chronicle, it's a chapter, it's a so on and so forth. And by changing it to visual language, I think it's a little more kind of universally quickly understood, because the stuff you're doing in a tabletop game is closer akin to like a TV show or a movie. But in the case of They Came From, kind of moving to Matthew, you can even go further into that metaphor on a mechanical level. I know you did that a lot with They Came From Beneath the Sea.
Well, it's I think especially it's the idea of the writer's pool, which isn't a completely brand new concept to role-playing, but it fits very well in Storypath, and we have different names for it in our different games, of course, but it is generally the idea that accepting a failure to contribute a die, basically, to your writer's pool allows you rewrites later, or re-rolls if you right. prefer, and that simulates the idea that characters in media, they will often go through several failures before they succeed. Otherwise it would be a terribly dull story if they were doing nothing but winning all the time.
Right.
And obviously there's a lot of games where you do nothing but winning, and you don't feel that as a negative at all, because if you're playing something like, I don't know, Pathfinder, D&D, you like killing the monsters, you like looting the treasure, and that may be oversimplifying it, but that is certainly how those games are built at their core. One of the things we are trying to enforce through, or at least encourage through Storypath, is the idea that that failures in Storypath make for a more interesting tale.
Right.
And so you can spend your rewrites in They Came From Beneath the Sea on a number of things. They can lead on to your use of cinematics. So fail a number of times, and you can then go on to purchase one of your cinematic abilities that will allow you to essentially, quite literally, rewrite the game from a meta level, from a player level. But that very much gets into They Came From exclusive territory, I'd say. But actually, I say that. The two of you have got more familiarity with Trinity than I have, and I know there's some similarities, even in the cinematics name, that Trinity has. Maybe you could explain that.
I would say it's like the main thing that Trinity has, to my knowledge, is dramatic editing.
That's it, yeah.
Which actually is kind of comes from the original adventure game, but has been now moved into the mainline, what I call talents for the core Trinity experience. And actually, one thing perhaps to talk about is the Trinity continuum is structured a bit closer to something like Chronicles of Darkness, I would say, in the sense that there's a core rule book that is just modern day, and the default character in that are what I call talents. So you're slightly above average persons, and the language in there, like you said, is very similar in the sense that it's pitched like you are the protagonist of a television show.
Right.
How Trinity explains that is that talents have an innate subconscious ability to look through all the different timelines, and they can find the most optimal one for their action and then follow that. So basically, they look at the action, they go, okay, in all of these timelines, this one's the one where I can actually dodge the bullet. And I have enough power to actually make that timeline manifest the one I'm in.
Right.
But from a mechanical level, all that's really happening is that you actually have the ability to spend currency to say, dramatically, here's where, your gun fails to go off or whatever. You rewrite the scene slightly because that's dramatically appropriate. But what's interesting to me is that, like Matthew said, it's kind of the same mechanic on a base level. Is you fail to increase a currency and spend that currency to change elements of the world that are beneficial to your character down the road. But They Came From Beneath the Sea takes the approach of this is because making a movie at this time is cheap and chaotic. So things can change during the course of shooting the film. And Trinity actually has a completely different kind of very sci-fi or fantastic, not fantastical in the fantasy sense, but there's an in-world explanation of how this happens, and it justifies its currency on some level, even if the characters aren't entirely aware of it. And each of those ends up feeling different, which is fascinating. One of the things that's really cool about Storypath is that it allows this same core experience to go in very different directions, even though you're not changing mechanically much at all.
Well, yeah, even at the Scion origin level, before you really come into your powers, I mean, you were getting kind of granted this stuff by fate on some level.
Right.
So it's still a very street level game. As far as if you're playing Origin, because you're pretty much playing, people that are slightly better than other people at doing things.
Right.
But the reason for that, of course, is because there's still some part of you that is imbued with your Divine Parent's power, even though that you haven't had your visitation yet, so you haven't actually come into the more, impressive-looking powers. So we've got a mechanic in the game called Momentum, which is the most common kind of consolation that you get when you fail. And that's kind of an out-of-character thing, but I think in Scion specifically, that's more like Destiny at work.
Right.
And that's, you get a point of it whenever you get a failure or a setback or a condition, and then you can spend it to kind of control the story's narrative pacing, directly add dice to your dice pool, that kind of thing. So, so that's your main, reward for failure. And of course there are other ones in different games, but that's kind of the main consolation, which is really cool. And it's nice that it's kind of like, well, maybe you failed at this, but you've still got this little spark of divine fire inside you, so we're gonna poke you a little bit and get you back on track, because you're supposed to be a hero someday. So yeah, I like it.
I do enjoy any game where we've spoken occasionally about board games and role-playing games where there's a very fine balance between succeeding and failing. And I've I guess screamed praise for games like Gloomhaven and Time Stories, and I won't go into them in great detail, but the main point being, I always marvel at the balance that a seemingly complex scenario, you may succeed at it, but it always feels like you've just succeeded.
Yeah.
And that always leaves the players feeling very much rewarded for what they've done. If you have gone through 2 hours of a Gloomhaven scenario, for instance, and you feel like you cakewalked it, but it took 2 hours, you're going to feel like, we rolled some dice. Well, you don't roll dice, but you get the point. And I love that mechanic being translated into RPGs. I love the idea that there's a genuine tension and that the mechanics support it. And I know we've said it before, but Rose Bailey, one of our colleagues, many-a-time colleagues, has a strong love of integrating mechanics with setting. It can't feel detached to what you're doing in the game. You shouldn't be taken out of what your character's doing to roll dice. And I think Storypath is an excellent way of making the dice mean something, making those little mechanical feats mean something to what your characters are achieving, and failing repeatedly in order to eventually succeed is one such way of doing it. Because I think, and it's strange, I never even really made the connection more broadly that it's an excellent way of simulating media. But even if I went to one of your favourite genres, Eddy, noir, and I think of the typical hard-boiled private detective, probably drummed out of the police force for trumped-up charges of excessive brutality or something like that,
right,
as he is trying to solve the case of the missing heiress, he's being beaten up, he's losing his car, his gun gets stolen by a pickpocket. Every single step along the way he's going to lose something, but it will ultimately lead to him having a moment of revelation where he works out the person behind it. And we translate that mechanically in a very simple way with momentum, with writers' pools, where repeated failure will ultimately come back to reward you. And for me, that leads to a very satisfying role-playing experience.
Right, and it's... Go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny, because while you're talking about, like, Gloomhaven and stuff, I actually made a video game connection that I'm not sure I've ever made before with this kind of feeling. And as our listeners probably know, I played World of Warcraft for 10 years. I'm actually playing again right now. It's a whole thing. But I was in, like, a raid guild for a long time. And the fights and raids where you just walked in and stomped on a boss and then kept going, like, yeah, you got loot, but they weren't interesting. The fights where we would spend, hours or days or weeks trying to get it and then finally get it right were always the most satisfying.
Yes.
So it's like, yeah, it is nice to have, some kind of triumph on the heels of failure. And that's what most narratives do. I mean, in any fiction that you read, if your hero is just winning the whole time, they're kind of boring.
Mm-hmm.
If they're, getting captured and having to think their way out of it and, getting beat up, whatever, having setbacks, thinking that they found the thing and then they didn't find the thing. Like, that's interesting. And that's what you want to read about. So, yeah.
Right. And one of the things that I think is interesting about momentum before we move on is the fact that there's a pool. It's not each person has to have their own momentum thing. So while momentum mechanically fulfills a similar role as willpower, what's shifted and changed is that if one character is really struggling, the whole group gets benefit out of that. Mm-hmm. But also that means that the group can squander those benefits. So it's not a done deal. It's not like, okay, well, we failed, so we know we're going to win at the end. There's still genuine suspense and potential danger, because if you mismanage that momentum pool, or if someone just isn't failing enough, if you're doing too well, you may actually not be sufficient. So you're in an interesting situation where it's like, okay, our momentum pool's kind of low, and we know some things are going to get rough later, so maybe we should intentionally fail a few rolls here and try to invoke consolation to be able to have more later, and certain characters can lean into that. So you have, again, a fictional conceit of the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time, which in tabletop role-playing games doesn't often happen, because you always want to put your best character in their best role. The face always does the social stuff. The bruiser always gets into the fights. But you can have those mismatches because you're trying to intentionally game the momentum pool a little bit, because everyone shares it.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's the thing. Another thing that's more unique, I think, to Storypath is the paths themselves. It's kind of it's not quite a skill, it's not quite an attribute, it's not quite a power. It's 1 to 5 dots of who you are. And I think they came from the CH did a really good job of using paths as kind of archetypes. So Matthew, can you talk a little bit more about how you use paths they came from?
Well, the idea of paths, as you say, it basically builds the template of your character with different components. So to take one of the example characters came from Beneath the Sea, we have, let's see, I'll get one of them in front of me right now. We have an actor and spokesperson in one of the scenarios in the back of the book. and their paths, they have their archetype, which in this case, J. Everett is a mouth, a speaker, an actor, someone who wants to be known, wants to be on the front line with a camera and probably trying to interview the aliens as they come ashore, for better or worse. They have an origin, which is suburbia, and a suburban origin is going to tell you a little about what the character's skills are likely to be, just as the archetype is as well. It's also going to inform your roleplay based on, as it says, your origin, your kind of attitude towards the bigger city characters. And then you'll have your ambition, which is your final path. In his case, it's family man. And we can quite easily piece together what kind of character J. Everett is from knowing that he's a family man, comes from suburbia, and his profession, his archetype, is that he is a mouth. That tells us a little something. It goes on to inform the skills that he has access to at the beginning of the game, and you basically level up, as it were, your various paths rather than your character holistically like you do in other games. You don't just spread experience points where you want, you're essentially contributing your experience to the paths that make up your character to reinforce certain elements. Would that be an adequate synopsis, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you're right. It fulfills the role of what we have in the past. It's not still called splats. Here's your clan, here's your covenant, put those together, you get a thing. But it gives more kind of texture and depth, because they can lead to things like edges, your special powers, and they came from this case, I think cinematics, right, come from those. Is there cinematics that come from the paths?
No, the cinematics, I'll forgive you for not remembering, because They Came From has a lot of moving parts. I think it has more than the other Storypath games.
Right.
And that's something I juggled with in, I guess, designing They Came From. It's whether I should take any of these out or should I leave it to the director and the players to choose. But your paths will have impact on your trademarks, essentially, your specialities.
That was it.
The things that are going to make you particularly excel in certain skills, but specifically we were calling them props, and I think we've changed their name now from props to, and honestly the name escapes me from the top of my head, but again it's specific.
We just work on these games, we don't know anything about them.
Right.
We work on a lot of games.
Yeah, they do. They blur together after a bit.
But they were called props from a movie sense. These differ from game to game, but it's essentially like feats, special abilities, something that is tied specifically to your path that allows you to do something that another character cannot. So J. Everett, for instance, has the monologue prop. So where he breaks off into a monologue at any point during the game, his character decides to put one foot up on a rock, and look out to sea as the waves splash against him and says, I guess we'll never know what dwells beneath the waves, but what I do know is my family are safe for now, or something like that, and doesn't address anyone at the table, probably looks away from the table while he's doing it. You'll get certain bonuses for using your props like that. It's going to differ from prop to prop, and likewise they will differ from game to game, but it's just another way of making characters more customizable, therefore make characters more interesting. Just because you have one mouth in a party and They Came From Beneath the Sea, you could have three and they would all be customized in different ways. And just because, they may even all be a band of journalists, they could all have the exact same career path, but if their origins are different and their ambitions are different and the props you choose are different, then the characters become different. Right,
and again, kind of this way we can change the parts to reflect the different focus. Trinity, as a counterpoint, instead has skill tricks. So it's less about a thing that's attached to a part of your character and more about what your character does well. So it's a bit beyond just in old storytelling terms. They had specializations where, okay, additional die if I'm doing a thing. This is kind of a step beyond that. So if you have technology at a high level, then not only might you be particularly good at hacking, but you may get a specific trick that says you get enhancements and bonuses for hacking in these kinds of particular environments. So it becomes a very distinct little bit of mechanical benefit that you get. And they usually fall into the same rough categories. You get an extra die, your difficulty number changes, you get enhancement, which I'll talk about in a second. But because the shift is to about what your character can do rather than who you are. So it's not a huge mechanical change, but by shifting the focus slightly, you get a very different aesthetic experience from it.
Right. And what's the equivalent of that in Dystopia Rising, Eddy?
So it kind of splits the difference a little bit. There still are skill tricks because Dystopia Rising is definitely action adventure. And actually, I should take a step back and mention that DR is the only Storypath game. It doesn't have an in-game conceit for momentum. It's just a thing you do. It's just because it's more post-apocalyptic genre conceit. Things are terrible for a long time, and then you have a brief victory at the end, but then things are terrible again. That's just the post-apocalyptic fiction cycle. So rather than tying it to anything, I just explicitly it's a thing there. But they still have skill tricks. Again, it's a lot about what you can do and how the community comes together. But also, one of the roles is strain, which is the kind of character you are. And we talked a bit more about strains on the DR deep dive, but they have a strain condition, and they also have strain exclusive edges. So you get some mechanical benefits for being a member of a strain, but also it comes with that a certain thing that you can never overcome. What used to be called like clan flaws is the best analogy, but they're always detrimental, quote unquote. But again, because of the way Storypath works, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more incentive to generate momentum. So I was very adamant against phrasing them as flaws or anything negative, because it's not that. It's just, this is a thing that will get you in trouble, yes, but that trouble will get you more momentum, which ultimately is a currency you want to spend.
Right.
But conditions are another kind of interesting piece, and to be fair, I think this is mostly cribbed from the Chronicles of Darkness, but conditions are really great because it's kind of, when you do X, this preset amount of Y happens to you. You are possessed, you are drunk, you are this. While I know sometimes it can be tricky to kind of remember all of them, I do think mechanically it works really well because you don't have 5 different powers doing slightly similar things.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why I stole it for Pugmire, frankly, is because how many times can you do Charmed? And it's always this exact same little bit of mechanical problem. And you have it's nice you then get a card. It's like, cool, here's all the stuff I need to know. Pull the card up. Okay, now I'm charmed. I have to remember all this stuff. And then over time, as you get used to those, you'll see us more. And Dystopia Rising has a lot of conditions because I wanted to reflect a complicated environment, but in very consistent ways. There's lots of like, okay, intoxicated is a very distinct thing. When characters have mechanical failure, they get flaws, which are basically conditions. And so you have basically conditions on your stuff, but like it's out of gas, it's just the starter won't work. But they all kind of work in roughly similar ways. But by having a lot of them, they don't feel like it's only the same 12 you're going through all over time. There's lots of options. But every time the option comes up, it's like, oh, this thing again. I know how that works. Great. And so you feel like you understand what's going on. You don't have to learn a different version of the same power, which is a nice bit of what we call tech in the Storypath system, I think.
Right.
So one thing I haven't get into dice roll. We got into all about character creation, how stuff works. I want to get into dice rolling a bit. Because again, it's something that I really do love about Storypath. And actually, before I go further, I should say full props to all the Storypath designers. Neil talked about them a lot in his interview, so go back and listen to them. He name drops all the people who were involved in Storypath.
Yeah,
but Neil
there
in particular,
are quite a few people.
Yeah, this was a long process, but I do think it was worth it because of cool things like this. And frankly, this is one of my favorite bits of the system, is when you roll the dice. It's very similar to people who've played such games before. You take the dots in your skill, you take the dots in your attribute, that's how many dice you pull. You roll, you're trying to get a certain target number or higher. What the target number is depends on what tier of game you're playing, so the more powerful you are, the easier it is to just generally succeed more often. If you're playing an aberrant superhero, you're just going to succeed at even basic things much more often than an average person on the street. So changing a difficulty number makes things easier. But then you generate successes, and instead of comparing those to a static number of difficulty, you spend them. And I think that's amazing, because what you do is first of all, you buy off the difficulty. Okay, I succeeded the thing. And then if you have equipments or stuff that you benefit, rather than adding more dice, it gives you enhancement, which is a bonus number of successes if you buy off that difficulty. So it's like I have a lockpick kit, and so that gives me +1 enhancement, which means if I roll, I buy off difficulty. So I have to unlock the lock first, but now I can do even more on top of that, which means you may be buying off things that are called complications, which are something that makes the roll, it won't stop you from doing it, but it makes things harder. So that lock might have an alarm on it. And so I can pick the lock, but if I don't buy off the alarm complication, the alarm's going to go off. So that's where the lockpick comes in. It's like, okay, well, now I do it so well that I even bypass the alarm. Or you can spend them on stunts, which are, I want to do something even cooler than I did before. So I had the option to, relock it behind me so the next guy doesn't even realize that it was unlocked. So I spent a stunt to make it look like my passage was completely invisible. And so by changing the focus from successes are a binary result to a spendable currency, it gives us so much more depth in how dice rolling works. Have you guys seen similar attitude towards it, or do you have a different opinion on that?
My experience is very much the same. Enhancements and complications come. There's a sort of scent of fate to them,
Right.
in the sense of tagging a scene, and that's good. I love Fate. Fate does what it does incredibly well. And I love the idea of interacting with your scenery, and it encourages directors, storytellers, guides, call them what you will, to actually start thinking about the room your characters are about to throw down in. It always excites me a lot more as a role player when the director starts describing that not only is the warehouse full of crates, but there's also two gantries running across above your head. One looks sturdy and made of steel, one is rusted and has a hole in the middle. There's pipes running up the wall, some of them are issuing steam, and so on. As soon as you start getting that flavour, you can start utilising it in your roles, and that's exactly what Enhancements and Complications does. Now, one thing I've found players doing, and this is interesting because I don't think it's something we've really accounted for in the writing of these games, and it's something I love seeing players essentially working the system. They try and turn complications into enhancements.
Oh.
Or enhancements into complications for other characters. So I'm trying to think of a good example, but the idea being that, I don't know, in a game like They Came From, it's quite a bit easier because an alien might react worse to the steam than a human, so you might use the enhancement of knocking the pipe with your elbow so that steam blasts into the alien's face, and now the alien, when he's rolling, is going to have a complication on his roll, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So it's
because the alien may get through the steam. So he makes his roll, makes it through the steam, no problem, but he takes an injury because he had to go through steam. Yeah,
and there's lots of different ways of painting that, but I enjoy that. I like the versatility of it. And all the way down to the simple fact that we're still using D10s and it's still a static target number of 8 is good news for me, because it means players don't need to learn as much, and when they do find out the new things on top of that system, they get excited by the possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that was one thing that Rich was very firm on during the design, was that he wanted something that resembled those games. But certainly Scion definitely ran into this, and Trinity ran into it to a certain degree, that's old school system doesn't scale very well. And having stuff like enhancement and even scale, which I'll get to in a second, addresses that, because it allows us to shift numbers around rather than always, because those games really all you could do is add or subtract dice. That was really the only and move a target number occasionally. Those are only two levers you can move around. By having these additional components, not only just, like you say, it makes it more robust and more flexible, but also gives us more levers that we can flip and switch. We can say things like, this gives you enhancement in this circumstance, or this gives you a complication in this circumstance, and doesn't touch the dice rolling at all. So you can have higher things. And then the addition of actual scale, which every game has some version of this, although different focuses on different things. And scale's idea is that there's a numerical number assigned to a thing. It's always assumed to be scale 1 by default. But the bigger or more powerful or the more complicated something is, it increases in scale. And at a certain point in time, you opt out of being able to engage with it. I keep looking back to where they came from because there's great visual examples of this. But giant monsters came up a lot. It's like if you have a scale monster 4, but your firearms are scale 1, and the scale is more than 2 differences, you can't even affect them. So basically that's why bullets bounce off of giant rubber monsters. It makes perfect sense. The scale is just too high. So it allows for that kind of interesting interplay. Although I've always wondered, as players play the game, it seems understandable as I've designed it and as I've explained to people, but I don't know how well I know people just opt out of scale if it's something that people don't engage with very often. I guess it depends on the game you're playing.
Yeah, I think it'll come into play a fair amount in Scion, just because you do have, mortal characters and also eventually gods, since we're rolling into demigod and god, talk now. And so that's one of those things that becomes really, really important because, an origin level Scion probably shouldn't attack a god tier Scion. That's a terrible idea. You will die.
Nothing good will happen from that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it'll come into play there a lot. It comes into play a fair amount in Trinity only because we have, spaceships and space stations and aliens and all kinds of weird stuff happening. So yeah, you're like, yeah.
Well, I was going to say is scale was actually a big conversation during Aberrant. I could talk a little bit about Aberrant now because we're starting to get close to that. Steve Kenson was the designer on that, and it's one thing. The first piece he tapped into was like, how far can I go with scale? Because in Trinity, I think Scion both, scale goes to 1 to about 5.
Yeah, I think it's 5, 6, maybe maybe 6 for a planetary weapon if I remember correctly, but I don't remember exactly. Don't quote me on that, and also don't fact check me.
Right, yeah. Just assume we are both correct and also wrong. But Aberrant, Steve blew out the scale in both directions. It goes up really, really high because he needed to reflect not only superhero feats of strength and the like, but also things like how super scientists can invent technology that has never existed before. Your Reed Richards, your Tony Starks. So they had to have intelligence scales that were just very, very high. And also in reverse, to get Ant-Man.
Right.
You have to go actually smaller than scale. So scale actually goes backwards in Aberrant. And so there was a lot of talk around how that would work. But again, because it's so clear as to what scale's doing, it's every step you get a narrative enhancement. So it's like if I'm punching another character in scale, then if I'm higher scale, I get enhancement every time I hit you, and you lose enhancement every time you attack me. But then there's also dramatic scale, which is just kind of what happens in the environment around you. So if I'm super powerful and I'm scale 3 and I punch you, I knock you back, dramatic scale is you go through the building collapses, everything falls down, because dramatically that's what the scale means. But on a mechanical level, it just means I get 4 more enhancement or whatever to hit you. So once that's all clear, then it becomes, okay, well, I can see how this goes further up and further back, and how we could tap into and to play with that. So it saves a lot of design, really, because we just do stuff like, okay, this applies to spaceship. It's like, okay, speed. If I'm driving a car really fast, that's one scale. If I'm flying a ship across planets, it's a completely different scale. But we could still use similar numbers. We don't have to go into super gigantic numbers because they're not on the same plane. A car is never going to be a spaceship in a race, period. So you don't have to worry about that. It's cool. They're just different scales. And then on this scale, this spaceship is X fast, and on this scale, this car is X fast. So they may look like similar numbers, but when you compare them, because you scale rules, they don't even compete.
Right. It applies to like certain weaponry and stuff too, because yeah.
Oh, really?
I thought there was a scale chart.
No,
it might
you're
have
right,
just been
because,
with, like, ship weaponry, but I thought there was something in there. And keep in mind, y'all, it's been like a year since I've read these, so I apologize for not having reread them before the podcast. But
No, that's fine. But no, I mentioned I meant anti-tank weapons.
Yeah.
Weapons example.
Yeah, I thought there was something where it's like this like scale weapon will always, you know, beat somebody who's attacking it with this one, essentially, or this one can go a lot farther or whatever.
Honestly, I enjoy taking as a bit of a tangent here.
Yeah, I love tangents.
I enjoy when we don't know the rules off by heart, because very few GMs do. Every GM has to look up the rules in a book at some point, and that's exactly the same as if you've worked on it, especially when you've worked on lots of you know one thinks we're anything but even for myself, when I run They Came From at conventions, and I've ran over close to 30, maybe more, demo scenarios of They Came From now, mostly in the interest of playtesting. I still have a cheat sheet of rules with me, because Storypath I find very intuitive, simple enough, but there's going to be some intricacies that I need to playtest, and they're rules I don't necessarily address every single time I run. And something like scale is exactly that kind of rule. When the heroes in a game of They Came From are up against gillfolk, it's unlikely they will also bump into Centipus, the 100-tentacled octopus, hence the name. I suppose it would just be the 100-tentacled Centipus, really. But either way,
Details.
But if Centipus shows up, then hell yes, we need the scale rules out, and at that rare event I will have to look those rules up, because I'm not presented with them every day. So it's the same for every game I run, whether it's Vampire the Masquerade or something for Chronicles of Darkness. I'm always going to be looking up the rules.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the reasons why I think storyteller screens are so popular, is because then you can just offload those notes onto a screen and reference them, right in your eye view, but then you don't have to memorize them.
Yeah, that actually used to be one of the reasons I was like nervous to run games, because I was like, well, I don't know all the rules and I'm gonna look stupid or whatever, and that's not the case. Like, everyone does it. It's very normal, and it's especially when your players throw you curveballs, which players inevitably do. Like, at some point, your player will go, I'm going to do this thing. And you're going to go, what? Oh, okay. Give me a second. You have to kind of figure out, like, what that thing will do, you know? It's like, I'm going to attack the dragon with music. Okay. Let's figure this out, you know? And it's just yeah.
Again, I know. I guess we're drifting a little off piece, but we have covered Storypath fairly thoroughly, so I'm happy to do so. That moment in a game when you're running it and a player asks to do something and you don't know the rules and have to look it up is sometimes one of the most enjoyable things.
Yeah.
Because as a GM saying, oh god, or really building, oh shit, I don't know what's going to happen now, and it gives the player a sense of satisfaction that, oh, I've thrown a curveball now. And so you look it up and you're making all these apprehensive noises, you find out the rules, you brief them in what those rules do, and then you roll your dice and see what happens. It's a similar feeling I get, and this I guess comes down to a GM psychology. As a episode title, but that feeling that in reverse I get when I'm running a game and all the players in unison will say, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
Because they are now suddenly worried for their characters. It's like to use a D&D reference, they're third level adventurers and they break into a cavern and there's a beholder in there. And they are nowhere near equipped to deal with a beholder, but there it is. And so all the rulebooks, all the D&D rulebooks will say, don't do this. But they now need to think of a way of getting out of this situation. So they all communally go, oh god, and it gives the GM a satisfaction because you've just surprised them. And I think that reciprocal thing where players throw something at you as a GM you're not expecting can be very rewarding for everyone at the table.
Oh yeah, I used to mess with my GM all the time. It was great.
Yeah, and, I mean, I think actually can bring us back to Storypath because one of the things that I know I struggled with as a storyteller for storyteller and storytelling is sometimes it's very hard to eyeball relative power strengths. You can kind of go, okay, this vampire's got 30 odd dots in skills. This vampire's got 20 odd dots in skills. So this was gonna be a little more powerful. But aside from Vampire the Masquerade Generation, it's like it was really hard to kind of tell. There's no objective metric of saying this guy is more powerful than that character. Whereas Storypath with scale, it does allow you to kind of broadcast. I play with this. One of the few places I do play with scale in Dytopia Rising is for the undead, because there are just be some zombies that are really hard to defeat or kill or otherwise have a really power. So being able to say this character's scale 3 says something, and also it allowed me to do things like an individual shambler is trivial to kill. I mean, they're very easy to destroy a single slow-moving zombie. When you have 200 of them, that's now a big thing. But rather than adding 200 dice, I just go, cool, it's now a scale 5 shambler functionally. And it's like, oh, that's a big thing. So when I say that, players go, okay, we can't just walk in there and start killing them. We got to think of a plan because the word scale has come up. And that's something that traditionally the older systems have had struggles with being able to broadcast clearly to players. You may want to rethink this because level works so well in D&D. Mm-hmm. Being able to say, oh, this is CR 12. Oh, well, we're level 3. We should probably not go in that room. So it allows for a nice shortcut.
Sorry, I was just imagining like the actual character saying that. Just, someone hanging around in character in a D&D party, just being like, oh, behold, that's a CR 12. Let's fuck off. I don't want to be in there.
There's actually been some webcomics that play with that. Why am I blanking? There's a stick figure one that I'm blanking on the name of right now.
Order of the Stick?
Yes, Warrior Stick, thank you. That does a lot of that, where it's like they'll bring the out-of-game language in-game, and it's both absolutely appropriate and also extremely wrong. So it's kind of fun. I mean, I like when games can... This is way off topic, but I like games that they can bring the out-of-game language also in-game.
I mean, that's something that I think the Game from the Sea is kind of built for.
Yes. Actually, that's a very good example, is that you could say things like, okay, I need to talk to the writer's room to get a rewrite for this. Oh, okay, well, you're using a rewrite pool. Boom, done. It's straightforward.
Well, it's something I really went back and forth on, and some groups struggled to understand at first, was the idea you're not actually making a movie.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have pitched they came from Beneath the Sea as you are movie directors and you're making a movie and the characters are actors. And I think you could definitely play it like that. The tools are there for you to play it like that. But for my money, it is more of a meta game.
Yeah.
I think it somehow balances, and not to blow my own trumpet too much, because this comes down to the writing team, to the editor. We two of whom are in this call.
Hello.
Hello.
We have fashioned a game where it's fairly seamless. The break between playing a character and playing a player, making an out-of-game decision that has an impact on the character. There's no I suppose, shame in the fact that you are breaking immersion, because there is no break from immersion. The whole idea of going to the player to find out what cinematic they want to use or what quip they want to play for their character is an actual part of the game.
Yeah.
And when players start to understand that, they really start to get it.
Well, yeah, what I like about the Game from the Sea is that you are simultaneously actually in a B movie with actual stakes. Like, you are actually getting attacked by monsters, but as players, you also kind of know it's a movie and that you can change things. So for the characters in-game, there are stakes. They're just being attacked by crab people or what have you. But for the players, you know that you can occasionally rewrite things or kill an extra or what have you. But yeah, it's kind of a strange thing to hold in your brain when you're looking at it, but it works so beautifully. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think is so much fun about it, because you get the actual stakes of a horror game with all the fun of we're in a B movie and things can go terribly wrong.
And that's actually similarly what there's a lot about Trinity Continuum's conceit, because from an out of world perspective, the Trinity Continuum is a reboot. We've started from scratch, even though there's a lot of similarities to the existing first editions of the games. We're also rewriting continuity pretty heavily. But because Ian worked on the concept of talents, dramatic editing basically being the core concept if you go through different timelines, maybe those first issue games are also valid timelines in the Trinity Continuum. And then you go even one step further, which is that all tabletop role-playing games in the Trinity Continuum are canon. And we've broke a few people's brains a couple times because they're like, well, in my version of the game, blah, 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 so I don't know if that's canon or not. And say, well, in your game, it is canon. As far as your game is concerned, that's absolutely objectively true, and our games are wrong. Because from the conceit of the Continuum, you are one of many possible variant timelines. And I personally just enjoy that because it gives a certain amount of credibility, I think, to the tabletop game. It's like, my game is just as valid as the game printed in the books.
Right.
And I think that's cool.
Yeah, that is super cool.
But we are getting close on time. So we've talked a ton about Storypath and what we can do and what's exciting about it. I would like each of you to talk about which is your favorite Storypath game.
What?
Oh.
Yes, that jerk question.
How are you gonna make it? Someone's gonna be mad at me.
I will be if you answer wrong.
I was gonna say I've got the lead devs for Dystopia Rising Evolution and the game we need to see in this, and you're gonna make me tell you that it's not actually either of those. It's definitely Scion. No, okay, so I do love all of them, but I have such a soft spot in my heart for urban fantasy. I've always been an urban fantasy fan. That's a genre I've loved forever. You've heard me rave about my favorite book, War for the Oaks. You've heard me rave about Kushiel's Dart, where they're the scions of angels. Huh?
Basically, yeah.
Weird. So like that's just a genre that I very much enjoy. Speaking of Kushiel's Dart, though, I do kind of want to take Scion and try to make a historical campaign with it, because I would love to play like Dark Ages Scion. Because that's pretty much cool. Kushiel's Dart. But yeah, so I'm a big fan of that one. I love Trinity for what it does. I haven't played a lot of superhero games. So when it comes to things like Aberrant and whatever, I'm not sure I've ever played a superhero role-playing game. I've played superhero like MMOs. I used to play City of Heroes and Champions and stuff. But yeah, so that's not totally my genre, even though I do like superhero comics on some level. I do want to play Eon when it comes out, or Aeon, because I do like sci-fi, but once again, that's just not like my number one genre. So I'm gonna go with Scion for setting. They came from for mechanics. Because I'm such a huge fan of the rewrites and the B-movie aspect and stuff like that.
What's the difference? Matthew, what about you?
Well, being driven by my ego.
It's definitely Dystopia Rising, right?
Yes, definitely Dystopia Rising.
Yeah. No, it's definitely They Came From Beneath the Sea. And, that's because there's a personal connection there. It was my concept, and it's been built into the game I wanted it to be. I think I first spoke about They Came From Beneath the Sea on my YouTube channel probably 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh, wow.
The ideas I had about it, and lots of people have a game in them, or an idea of a game. And to see it come to fruition, as it has done in text, and no doubt it will do in release in the coming months, year, is obviously deeply gratifying. But, as we're speaking about Storypath, I think when I was discussing with Rich Thomas how we were going to make They Came From, we discussed, should it have its own system or should it use Storypath? Mm-hmm. And I looked at both, had plenty of discussions, and it was as if Storypath had been made for They Came From when I got deep into it. And this was in one of Storypath's earlier versions, because it's been through a few iterations and remodelings, and the fact that Storypath's finished version fits They Came From so well, and it gives me confidence that if They Came From Beneath the Sea is popular, and we do a Hammer horror version, and we are able to do a Goosebumps-esque version and things like that, the system will work just as well for those two.
Absolutely.
So I have to say they came from beneath the sea, but I'm going to add the caveat in there that I love Scion, I love everything I've read for Scion, and I can't wait to play Scion once I have the physical product in my hand. I'm waiting for the physical one, because while I play a lot of online games using PDFs, my actual tabletop group wants to play Scion, and I think they all backed it. So
you kind of have to now.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Actually, it's interesting you mentioned about the feeling of that, because I had the exact same conversation with Dytopia Rising. Is they had their own house system, which was kind of storyteller-ish. And I approached them, I was like going, do you want to create your own system? Do you want to use Storypath? It's like, I don't want to necessarily shill the house system. I don't want you to feel like you have to use the Onyx Path house system, but here's what it can do. And within like a couple days, they're like, yeah, we looked it over. This is absolutely a perfect fit for what we want. So, I mean, it was interesting that I had the exact same experience for such a totally different game. So I think it speaks to the strength of Storypath. Mm-hmm. So cool. So I'm going to skip my answer and go right to the outro.
No. You made us do it. You made us do it, and you have to do it now, Eddie. I don't care if you're the host of this episode. I will take the host's microphone away from you and make you answer.
You will reach through the screen, poltergeist.
I will turn this podcast around right now.
We will go right back on.
Dixie,
okay.
I need to stop. I really need to go.
That's fine. I have to actually say, it's like, again, it's really tough. I do love a lot of what they came from going there. And certainly not as strong an emotional connection, but Matthew and I spent a lot of time talking through the mechanics of it, so I have a personal kind of satisfaction that it's come out as well as it has, because I feel like I helped in some way with that happening. And obviously, with Dytopia Rising, that was me kind of building that up from the ground up. But all of that said, I do have a soft spot for Trinity, because I wasn't a huge fan. I was not Ian Watson level of fan for those games, because I don't think anybody could be Ian Watson level of fan for those games. He is candescent in his fandom for them. But I mean, I did enjoy the possibilities of Aeon and Aberrant and Adventure in their own separate ways, and watching it grow up and seeing the fact that it can do so much in a seamless whole is just endlessly fascinating to me. It's like every time you pull away an onion layer, there's even more underneath, and it's different and interesting and engaging in a completely new way. Mm-hmm. And the fact that all this stuff exists kind of simultaneously and all feels distinct as well is just an amazing feat. So I'm really, really excited to see where Trinity in particular is going to go.
Yeah, no, I love what you can do with Trinity. Just in terms of being able to take it to pretty much any genre and have it be a valid canonical thing. Because I know a lot of people are already asking us about Adventure for Trinity, and it's like, we'll see. We're working on them. We're working on all the Trinity books. That one's, later. Let us get Aberrant out first.
Right, let us
get the core out first.
Yeah, we just have to get the core out the door, and I still do the pre-edit pass on Aberrant. So I mean, we need a minute.
Yeah.
But just I think it's a great setting. I think it's another example of the setting and the system working really well together. Mm-hmm. So thank you for holding me accountable, Dixie. I appreciate that.
You're gonna just make us uncomfortable.
Yeah. See, I mean, it's really that's the joy of hosting, though, is making everybody else uncomfortable. But speaking of uncomfortableness, where can people talk to you about on social media, Dixie?
You can find me... That's not uncomfortable. What?
No, I was about to say.
You can find me at Dixie Cyanide on Twitter, on Instagram, on the forums, on all kinds of places. I've had that handle for way too long.
Matthew?
You can find me on YouTube and the Onyx Path forums as the Gentleman Gamer. You can find me on Twitter as Clack Click Bang, and I will use this sign off to say, if you've not checked out the Chicago by Night Kickstarter, what's wrong with you? Do it. I'll love you forever.
Right. It's not peer pressure. It's just your turn. And as for me, as always, you can find me just about any social media website at Eddy Fate. That's EDDYFATE. EddyFate.com is my website. My professional stuff, you can find me at pugsteady.com. Again, just about anywhere. And that's our deep dive. So thank you guys for listening. And as always, many worlds, one Pathcast.
Shut up, Eddie.
Actually, I just realized if I hold my nose like this, I do sound like a 50s radio reporter.
Do you?
Well, I've also talked nasally like this, and... Well, in my head it sounds that way. I don't know if that actually comes
This just in, the Soviet menace.
Right.
Well, there's our sing. This just in, the Soviet menace. What is this voice? What am I doing?
Submarine spotted in the Baltic. Sweden is alarmed. More from White Wolf later.
There we go. That's what we needed.
It's like one of those Pathé trailers before the movies.